This short video is going to show you one of the best uses for ChatGPT in your classroom, and that is to make it compose and carry out a multiple choice quiz with your students on any topic you like. Watch on to find out more. Subscribe to my channel and like this video. You can find out when I post more videos on this topic. Now, I've done a much longer video on how to set up your students with ChatGPT and how to check that you can do everything you need to do in your school to use ChatGPT. You can find that video here. Click on that link and watch the video. It tells you how to make sure that you're allowed to use ChatGPT in your school, how to get permission to use it, how to check with your IT team that you can use it, and how to set your students up for using it critically. All of that stuff is in that video. But now watch on and find out how you can use ChatGPT for multiple choice questions. I think this is a great way of using ChatGPT because you can be really specific with multiple choice questions, can't you? There's A, B, C, D, E. We're going to give it 5 options here, and one of them is right. And that gives ChatGPT less scope for making mistakes. It's pretty good at giving 5 different options, and it knows how to respond to your answer. So it can give really detailed and precise advice. As with the previous video I did, I got this prompt from Caitlin's Cookbook. Have a look at it now. You can see from the beginning of the prompt the phrasing, I want to improve my understanding of the terminology and processes involved in. If you look here, it says you're a GCSE chemistry student and you want to learn about fractional distillation. So I guess in that context, it does make sense to talk about the terminology and the processes. As a literature teacher, the word process is a bit meaningless for me, though terminology is useful. So I'm actually going to even make it a more specific prompt. And for me, I'm just going to take out the processes part of it and just talk about the terminology. And I'm going to go as specific as possible because the more specific you can get, the more precise the feedback's going to be. And I'm going to use it to think about Tennessee Williams, A Streetcar Named Desire, and the terminology to describe the kind of writing he uses in that play. I'm going to imagine that I'm an A-level English literature student and that I want to test my terminology on that. Of course, you can do it as a teacher. You write out the prompt you want, you copy it into an email, you send it to all your students, you tell your students to copy paste it straight into ChatGPT, and they can get going. Okay, so starter first, something obvious, anything you like, something connected with the topic that you're going to get it to work with the students on. So I'm going to get my students doing A-level Streetcar Named Desire. I'm going to get them to brainstorm all the technical terminology they can think of associated with the play. I'm going to get them to link it to quotations. If I wanted to, I could even create a quotation bank and say, what's the technique used in this quotation or in this moment in the play? Okay, something like that to get them set up. And then we're going to move on in there and we're going to start doing the activity with ChatGPT. This one's got a natural time limit. I'm going to actually expand the Caitlin's Cookbook example, and I'm going to put my own instruction in there at the end. And you can see that the instruction I'm putting in is that after 15 multiple choice questions, I want it to tell me how many I got right first time and what are the gaps in my knowledge. Now, that's a really useful thing for a teacher to know, isn't it? Imagine the teacher can then get the feedback on each individual student. How many did they get right first time and what are the gaps in their knowledge? You can't treat it the same as any kind of standard test, can you, where you've got all the students doing exactly the same questions? Because in ChatGPT, you never know what questions it's going to ask. So it wouldn't be right to get in results from your students and to compare the results of your students, because some of them might have had easier questions. They'd certainly have had different questions to each other. So don't use it in that way, but it can be very useful to get a feel for where your students are at, to find out how many answers out of 15 they got right first time and where the gaps in their knowledge are. You might be able to spot patterns in that. So let's move on in there with ChatGPT and see how it gets along. Okay, so here we are inside ChatGPT, and you can just click on this. You do not need to sign up or log in. When it asks you to do so, you just stay logged out. You tell your students to do the same and you're in. Here we go. I'm putting my prompt in. I'm an A-level English literature student. Notice that I'm not interested in processes, so I've cut out that bit. I've just gone for terminology. Okay, let's see how we get along here. I'm going to get a few of them right at first, I hope, and show you how it responds. And then I'm going to show you me getting some of them wrong so you can see how it responds to that. Okay. Yeah, it's really nice the way it tells you why you were right, and it gives you a bit of extra information there, doesn't it? You know, related to her past and the loss of her family estate. I don't know whether your students would look at that because they're probably keen to get on to the next question, but it doesn't just say, yes, you're right. It does tell you some more. So if you can train your students to look at those answers, to maybe make some notes on a notepad, that can really help them as well. Okay, let's get this one right as well. Clashing with the more refined, fragile Blanche. Yeah, it's giving you lovely little bits of analysis really there. So if you can get your students to focus on these little bits where it responds to you, then great. Okay, let's try getting some of these wrong now. See if I can get one wrong and see what it does. Gives me a hint, you see. I put in give me a hint, it's giving me a hint. Now that's very helpful, isn't it? So we'll go for B because of that hint. Yeah, you see? Let's get another one wrong. Okay, again, the hint sort of guides me towards the right answer without actually giving me the correct answer. So it's a really useful tool. You can see here that these questions are, I asked about the techniques, and so in the question, it's giving me the technique. So for example, the character of Mitch serves as a foil to Stanley. And then in the previous question, question 7, tragic flaw. Previous question, motif of light. So it's putting the techniques in the questions. Now, I'm quite happy with that, but you might decide, actually, you don't really like that. You'd rather the students were being asked about the techniques in the answers, and they had to select the techniques from the answers. And if that's the case, then you would want to change the prompt. And if you want to change the prompt, all you've got to do is you've got to play around with the prompt for a while, and you'll quickly see how ChatGPT is using your prompt, and then you can change it if you want to. These prompts are not fixed. You just move stuff around and you rewrite bits of it, and then pretty soon it's asking you a whole different set of questions based on your refined version of the prompt. So don't be afraid to do that. Do experiment with it before the lesson, and don't be afraid to change it if you want it to do something different and if you want it to create a different kind of exercise for your students. Let's move forward a bit further. Now it's going to give me my overall comment. 12 out of 15 questions correctly on my first attempt. It tells me that's excellent. Couple of areas you could strengthen your understanding. Function of stellar symbolism of the Varsuviana polka. Well, that's fascinating, isn't it? Now, what you really want to do at that point is when your students get to that moment, you're going to tell them to copy over here, click on that copy, and then they're going to send you an email with that overall comment in the email. If you can get them to do that, if you've got that kind of trust with your students where you can trust them to go through the exercise, copy it, and then send it on to you, that's going to give you some very valuable feedback on how they've done. You didn't write the quiz, you didn't mark the quiz, but you've got the feedback from the quiz. And meanwhile, your students have been thinking hard the whole time, each and every one of them. So that's great, isn't it? It's a lesson where all the students are engaged, all the students are thinking, your preparation time is minimal, and yet you get really valuable feedback at the end. Okay, so now you come back together and you do your plenary. Really important moment when you're working with ChatGPT, because the plenary is your opportunity to get the students to think critically about ChatGPT. So first of all, they may have had some questions where they thought that ChatGPT maybe told them this was the correct answer, but they thought there was a different correct answer. So one of the things you can ask them is, which of these questions did you find most reliable and least reliable? And you can get them to talk in groups about that, and they can compare together, and that can further their understanding of the text that they're studying. But also it furthers their understanding of LLMs, right? So you're not only teaching them your subject, you're also teaching them how to engage critically with LLMs. So it's got that dual benefit. The other thing I would do is I would certainly get them to talk to each other about which were the best questions it asked and that really made them think deeply. And perhaps they could even ask each other those multiple choice questions at the end and see if the others in their group can get it right. Okay, so there you go. You're engaging critically with it. You're learning from it. It's a brilliant way of learning. It's a fantastic tool. Get going with it in the classroom.